بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين مع بعد فقد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الشديد ليس الذي يغلب الناس ولكن الشديد من غلب نفسه. Today's narration starts with a hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentions that in الشديد, that a true person who has strength, a strong person, is not such a person who can overpower everyone else. And in fact, as the more famous hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions that the real strong person is not someone who can wrestle somebody else to the ground and can take somebody out. This is not the real definition of a strong person. And even strong nowadays especially is very different. Sometimes diplomatically a person is strong, sometimes socially a person is strong. It's not always physical nowadays. Sometimes a person, he has such a awe in society that when he walks into the room, then nobody can say anything to him because of his financial status, or because of the power that he has within people, or because of the izzah which he's got. So he can do whatever he wants and nobody will ever question him. And many people, because of this, they capitalize on this and they take this for granted and they keep doing these kind of things. However, the Prophet ﷺ mentions that proper strength is not actually with this person. And the Prophet ﷺ mentions, وَلَكِنَّ الشَّدِيد, the real strong person is a person who can control himself. And nowadays, even in the secular world, we see that there's more of a turning towards this. When a person controls himself and disciplines himself and brings himself in the obedience of Allah, in obedience of the Quran and Sunnah, then a person, if he goes against that, he says, I'm not going to obey Allah, I'm not going to obey the Sunnah and what the Prophet ﷺ tells us to do, and he decides to do what he wants. So then he chases dunya for a bit. So he manages to acquire some wealth. So he has a lot of money in his bank account, or he has a very nice car, or then he develops, he buys a second property and he buys these things. And then he chases the dunya for this amount of time and then he achieves them. Now, these kind of examples we see for ourselves, that a person who fails to control himself, but he lets himself go and tries to achieve whatever desires he has. So if he wants to accumulate lots of wealth, he carries on accumulating wealth. And he may even get lots of wealth. He may attain another property. He may have a whole estate. He may buy a whole estate. He may have 5 or 6 cars in his driveway. He may attain all of these things. He may attain the thing he chases. So he chases dunya, he gets dunya essentially. But even we ourselves, we can look at that person and we see very often people who do get this kind of status, they don't get happiness in their actual lives. They still have, their problems increase in ways which they never thought of. So if a person eyes a certain goal, that I'm going to solve all my problems by owning 5 houses, so then all the rent will pay off every problem I ever have, so I'll never have problem again. So a person makes that aim in life. Then when he gets there, he'll find things in his life which he never even imagined would cause him a problem, will start causing him problems. And we all see people like this. That even we never see a person who chases dunya and then gets a certain amount of dunya and then is happy with his life and now, okay, I've got enough dunya. Because this is not the way the world works. So even the dunya example, even here, if a person has power example, a person can go around doing whatever he wants. If he doesn't exercise self-discipline is one of the best ways to get happiness, even in the secular world. To be able to control yourself, to be able to not do exactly what you want. Sometimes this is what muhasabah is really all about. And it's one of the key things with muhasabah, that when a person, he can assess himself and say, can I actually control what I'm going to do in the next 24 hours? Last 24 hours this happened. X, Y and Z went wrong. So in the next 24 hours which are going to come, can I actually control myself? Can I do what I'm meant to do? Or do I just carry on following my desires? Do I carry on doing whatever I feel like? So this is the difference. A person has to take a step back, assess the time which is going to come, assess the remaining days of Ramadan, assess the remaining time he has in life, and make this decision that the things which I'm going to do, am I going to be able to control myself to that level which I'm actually going to be able to do the correct thing. So this is a brief summary of this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ says that the real true person of power is a person who ghalaba nafsa, who actually gains authority over himself. He manages to control himself and he manages to do those things which will get him success, and he doesn't do those things which will destroy him. So this is the main message which the Prophet ﷺ he mentions inside this hadith. The next narration is a narration which is mentioned from Abu Rafi'. He says that I said to Abdullah ibn Umar that what do you say regarding a person who goes and exercises, he performs jihad and he goes and fights. And then the reply was, Ibda bi nafsi. He said that these people will do this. But he said, you start with yourself. فَجَاهِدْهَا وَابْدَأْ بِنَفْسِكَ فَغْزُهَا. So some people will go out into the battlefield and they will fight all the enemy and they will destroy the enemy and they will fight lots. And they will release all of their anger and they will channel their aggression. But Abdullah bin Umar, he says to him that first, before you go and try killing anybody else, first make sure that you have controlled yourself and you've got yourself under control, and that when you do things, you actually do it with a stable mind and you do it, thought and considered in a considered way. So this was his advice. So before going and fighting with everyone else, try and control yourself, fight yourself. And this is something which all of us are in a constant battle. We always have to, sometimes things happen which get us going, obviously, otherwise this is life, that sometimes something will happen which will make us very angry, sometimes something will happen which will make us very agitated, and then we can't control. So our main test is to make sure that we develop this. We try always, we're going to have this struggle that something wrong will go in life. Sometimes something will happen in our work life which will affect the rest of our lives. So we'll be sad because of that. Something will happen at home because of that. We'll be sad at work, and then we'll get angry with everybody at work. All of these kind of things. So we try and control ourselves, and this controlling means that we don't any emotion which we picked up somewhere else, we don't relay it everywhere else, and we don't go around angry at everyone just because of something else which has happened. This is something very important to control. So this is his advice, that before you go into the battlefield, make sure you've learnt to control yourself. فَإِنَّكَ إِن قَتَلْتَ فَارًا بَعَثَكَ اللَّهُ فَارًا. That if you kill somebody who's fleeing, if somebody is running away from you and you run after him and kill him and murder him, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will raise you in this state. That if you're running away, you will also be raised as a person who's running away. This is the punishment that a person will get. And وَإِن قُتِلْتَ مُرَائِيًا بَعَثَكَ اللَّهُ مُرَائِيًا. So if you're killed while you're running away, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will raise you while you're fleeing from the battlefield, and everybody will see this. So you have to have control over yourself before you try and take on such a big challenge. And if you go into the battlefield, another thing is that he mentions mura'i, and if you go and the whole point is just to show off to people that how brave, what an amazing swordsman you are, or what an amazing archer you are. If that's the only point, then on the day of Qiyamah everybody will see that. Abdullah bin Umar says, if you fight for the sake of showing off, then on the day of judgment Allah will raise you as a person who was fighting to show off. And only if you can fight sabiran, with pure sabr, and muhtasiban, and you can actually take yourself to account, only in that that's the only time when you're actually rewarded, when you're actually benefiting yourself. So this is the advice which he gave to the Sahabi, that there's no point just going around fighting everyone and for no reason. You have to be able to control yourself in this kind of way. And another narration we find, which is from Abdullah ibn Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu, that Rabah in Qasim, he came and he was asking about his father after Asr Salah. And so when he came so basically a guest came to ask to somebody's house and asked, where's your father? And they said that he's sleeping. So the person who came to visit, he said that, is this time for sleeping? It came after Asr, so he said, is this time to sleep? Is this the time to sleep? So then he went away. And then because the person who came was a very high and respected person, so then they sent somebody after him, and they sent a messenger that go bring him back and ask him. We can wake him up if you want. We can bring him, we can ask him. And then they chased him, and the messenger, he went after him, and by the time he got to him, he had already gone quite far, so he got quite late. So by the time he got to him, he said that person had already entered the graveyard. And when I got to him, I found that he was so engaged with himself, he was so oblivious to me, and he was so worried about himself, that if I said anything to me, he wouldn't have understood it anyway. So this is how worried. So all he done, he came, he asked, is your dad awake? He said, no, he's sleeping. And then he asked, is this time for sleeping? And then he went and they sent the messenger. The messenger is obviously now narrating the story. He said that we were delayed, and then he had entered the graveyard. وَهُوَ يُعَاتِبْ نَفْسَهُ. He was lamenting himself, he was telling himself off, and he was saying, أَقُلْتَ أَنَوْمُ هَذِهِ السَّاعَةِ. You said that, is this the time to sleep? أَفَكَانَ هَذَا عَلَيْكَ. Is this your job, that you go around telling people and dictating terms of when people should sleep? يَنَامُ الرَّجُلُ مَتَى يَشَاءُ. People can sleep whenever they want. وَقُلْتَ هَذَا وَقْتُ النَّوْمِ, and you have gone round to a random person and he was sleeping, and you've asked him that why is he sleeping at this time, as if you have some kind of right to do that. And he went to the graveyard and lamenting himself that how come you went to this random person and you said such a thing, even though nowadays this is something very common, that we go and say these kind of things, that, is this the time for sleeping, is this the time for eating, is this the food you're meant to be eating, is this the time for doing so many different things. We ask these kind of questions. So just because of this one question, he went to the graveyard and continued asking himself this question. And then وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ أَنَّ هَذَا لَيْسَ وَقْتُ النَّوْمِ, because how do you even know that you're asking these other people, how do you know what is the time for sleeping? And then the person who came to call him, he said that he was so engaged with himself that I left him alone. He didn't even notice that I was there. So these are just some of the stories where people, they take it upon themselves to look after themselves, and they take looking after themselves and their own nafs and controlling themselves very, very seriously. So from these stories we all take inspiration, and we all try and bring these stories into our lives as well, inshallah, and we try and make some kind of effort to bring these kind of accounting skills into our lives as well. So I make dua Allah gives me and all of us the ability to understand and act on what's been said.